The gunshot echoed across the Montana territory like thunder, sending a flock of startled birds into the pale blue sky as Zara Zimmerman fled through the tall prairie grass, her heart pounding against her ribs. It was 1875, and everything she had built over the past 2 years lay in ashes behind her small homestead, her hopes, and the life she had carefully constructed after her husband's death. Tears blurred her vision as she ran, her skirts catching on wild sagebrush, the distant sound of hoofbeats spurring her forward. The men who had burned her home were still searching, determined to claim the land she had rightfully homesteaded. Land that, unknown to her when she'd filed her claim, contained a valuable water source coveted by the territory's most ruthless cattle baron. When she reached the banks of the Powder River, Zara collapsed, her strength finally giving out. The water flowed steadily before her, too wide and deep to cross without help. Behind her, the smoke from her burning cabin still stained the sky. Ahead, across the river, lay the unknown. She buried her face in her hands and wept for her lost home, for her isolation, for the cruel reality of a woman alone in this unforgiving country. "Madam, you all right there?" the voice startled her. Zara looked up through tear-filled eyes to see a tall figure on horseback at the river's edge on the opposite bank. The stranger wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, dusty trail clothes, and had a Winchester rifle resting casually across his saddle. "They've burned everything," she called across the water, her voice breaking. "Everything I had." The rider studied her for a moment, then guided his horse into the river. The powerful animal moved confidently through the current, water splashing up around its legs. As they drew closer, Zara could make out the rider's features: a sun-weathered face with kind eyes under that hat brim, and a strong jawline softened by a neatly trimmed beard. "Name's Yates York," he said as his horse reached the bank where she sat. "Looks like you could use some help." He dismounted in one fluid motion and extended a hand to her. Zara hesitated, eyeing the stranger cautiously. In this territory, trust came at a high price. "Whoever's after you, they'll be here soon enough," Yates said, glancing over her shoulder toward the distant smoke. "I've got a camp upstream, safe place to catch your breath and figure things out." A sound in the distance, men's voices, horses made her decision for her. Zara took his outstretched hand. "Zara Zimmerman," she said as he helped her to her feet. "I've lost everything today." Yates lifted her easily onto his horse, then swung up behind her. "Not everything, Miss Zimmerman, not while you're still drawing breath." As they forded the river, heading upstream and away from her pursuers, he spoke again, his voice low near her ear. "I promise you this: whatever's made you cry today, you won't have to face it alone anymore." The water churned around them as the horse carried them to the far bank, away from the smoke and toward an uncertain future. Yates's camp was nestled in a small grove of cottonwoods half a mile upstream. It was a simple arrangement: a small fire pit, bedroll, and modest supplies. He helped Zara down from the horse and busied himself building a fire while she sat on a fallen log, still trembling from the day's events. "You hungry?" he asked, rummaging in his saddlebags. "I haven't eaten since yesterday," Zara admitted. She watched as he efficiently prepared a simple meal of beans, dried beef, and coffee. His movements were practiced and economical, suggesting years of life on the trail. As they ate, Zara gradually shared her story. She and her husband Harold had moved west from Pennsylvania 2 years earlier, filled with dreams of building a new life. 6 months after staking their claim, Harold had died of fever, leaving Zara alone. Instead of returning east, she had stayed, determined to make their dream succeed. "The land office said it was legal and clear," she explained, cradling the tin cup of hot coffee. "But 3 days ago, men working for Nathaniel Drummond showed up, claiming the water rights belonged to him. When I refused to sell, they returned today with torches." Yates nodded grimly. "Drummond's got half the territory under his thumb. Thinks he owns everything from the Yellowstone to the Black Hills. You know of him?" Zara asked. "Our paths have crossed." Something in his tone suggested there was more to that story. He doesn't take kindly to being refused. I had nowhere else to go, Zara said softly, staring into the flames. That land was all I had left. You've got grit staying on after your husband passed, Yates observed. Most women would have headed back east. Zara lifted her chin. I'm not most women, Mr. York. That brought a smile to his face, the first she'd seen. It transformed his features, softening the hardness around his eyes. No, I don't believe you are. As night fell, Yates offered Zara his bedroll while he kept watch. Trust didn't come easily in these parts, but exhaustion claimed her, and she slept soundly for the first time in days. Morning brought clarity and determination. Over a breakfast of coffee and hardtack, Zara announced her intention to seek justice through the territorial marshal. Drummond owns the marshal in these parts, Yates warned. Law's a flexible thing when money's involved. Then what would you suggest? Zara asked, frustration edging into her voice. I won't simply surrender what's rightfully mine. Yates considered her for a long moment. There's a settlement about 3 days' ride from here. Got a judge who's known to be fair-minded. Could present your case there. 3 days, with Drummond's men searching for me? They'll be expecting you to head for the nearest town, Yates replied. We'll take a different route. I know this country well enough to avoid unwanted company. Zara studied him, questions forming. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Let's just say I've got my own reasons for wanting to see Nathaniel Drummond knock down a peg. He stood, beginning to pack up their small camp. Besides, seems to me a promise is a promise. Said you wouldn't cry alone anymore, didn't I? By mid-morning, they were riding double on Yates's chestnut gelding, heading northwest away from the main trails. Zara was acutely aware of his presence behind her, the steady strength of his chest against her back, his arms reaching around her to hold the reins. It had been a long time since she had been this close to a man. You're not just a cowboy, are you? Zara asked as they crossed a stretch of open prairie. You handle yourself too, carefully. Yates was quiet for a moment. Was a lot of things before I took to droving cattle, scouted for the army for a spell, rode dispatch, did some hunting. And now? Now I mind my own business and try to stay out of trouble. There was a hint of amusement in his voice. At least until I found you crying by that river. They rode in companionable silence until midday, when they stopped to rest the horse near a small creek. As Zara filled their canteens, Yates scanned the horizon with a practiced eye. We're being followed, he said quietly. Zara's head snapped up, fear flooding back. Drummond's men, 2 riders, keeping their distance, been on our trail since about an hour after we left camp. What do we do? Zara asked, her hand instinctively going to the small knife at her belt, the only possession she had managed to save. Yates adjusted his hat, squinting into the distance. We changed the game. There's an old line shack about 5 miles east of here. Belonged to the Hargrove spread before they went bust. We'll hole up there, let our visitors come to us instead of running blind. The line shack was little more than a 1-room cabin with a sagging roof and a stone chimney, but its walls were solid logs, and it offered better protection than open country. As dusk approached, Yates positioned himself at the single window while Zara gathered wood for a small fire. Won't the smoke give us away? She asked. They already know we're here, Yates replied. Smoke or no smoke, but I'd rather face them warm than freezing. Nights get cold in these parts. The temperature dropped rapidly after sunset. Sitting close to the fire, Zara found herself studying Yates as he cleaned his rifle. His hands were strong but deft, handling the weapon with the ease of long familiarity. Have you killed men, Mr. York? She asked suddenly, surprising herself with the directness of the question. He looked up, his expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. Yes, in the war, some during, some after. He set the rifle aside. Not something I'm proud of, but not something I lose sleep over either. Every man I put in the ground was trying to do the same to me. Zara nodded slowly. I shot at those men today, the ones burning my home. I don't know if I hit any of them. Would it trouble you if you had? She considered the question carefully. I don't think it would. They came to destroy everything I'd worked for. They didn't leave me much choice. That's the way of it out here sometimes, Yates said. Choice gets narrowed down to the simplest terms. A noise outside the snap of a twig brought them both to alert. Yates motioned for Zara to move away from the fire into the shadows of the corner while he took position beside the window. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then a voice called from the darkness. We know you're in there. The woman comes out and maybe you ride away from this, mister. Yates glanced at Zara, who shook her head firmly. Nobody's coming out, Yates called back. You boys are trespassing on private property. I suggest you move along before this gets unfriendly. A laugh floated through the night. 2 against 1 friend, those ain't odds I'd bet on. Wouldn't be the first time, Yates replied calmly. To Zara, he whispered, stay low. If shooting starts, keep to the floor. The standoff stretched into hours. Occasionally, one of the men outside would call out a threat or attempt to provoke them, but Yates remained steady, conserving his ammunition and his words. Zara admired his composure. There was no fear in him, just a patient vigilance. Near midnight, a bold move came from their pursuers. A flaming arrow arced through the night sky, landing on the cabin's roof. Within moments, the dry wood began to catch. They're trying to smoke us out, Yates muttered. He made a quick decision. I'm going out the back, draw their fire. When they're focused on me, you slip out and head for the trees to the north. I won't leave you, Zara protested, not asking you to leave me. Just giving us both a fighting chance. He checked his pistol. I can handle myself, trust me on that. Before she could argue further, Yates slipped out the rear of the cabin. Moments later, gunshots erupted from the darkness, 1, then 2, then a rapid exchange of fire. Zara crouched by the door, heart pounding, knife in hand. A shout of pain cut through the night. More gunfire. Then silence. The cabin roof was now fully ablaze, flames beginning to drop through the ceiling. Smoke filled the small space. Zara had no choice. She pushed open the door and ran into the darkness, keeping low. She made it halfway to the tree line when a figure loomed in front of her. She raised her knife, ready to strike, when a familiar voice stopped her. It's me, Yates said, reaching for her arm. It's over. They won't be following us anymore. In the orange glow of the burning cabin, she could see a dark stain on his left sleeve. You're wounded, grazed, nothing serious. He led her quickly to where he had secured their horse. We need to put some distance between us and here before dawn. They rode through the night, Yates guiding the horse with his good arm, Zara's hands wrapped around his waist to keep him steady in the saddle. By first light, they had reached a sheltered ravine where a small spring provided fresh water. Zara insisted on tending to Yates's wound, using strips torn from her petticoat to clean and bind the bullet graze on his upper arm. Her fingers worked gently but efficiently, revealing a practical knowledge of such matters. You've done this before, Yates observed. My father was a doctor, she explained. I assisted him often enough to learn the basics. A doctor's daughter who can shoot, homestead alone, and stand her ground against armed men. Yates shook his head with a smile. You're a rare find in these parts, Zara Zimmerman. She finished tying the bandage, suddenly aware of their proximity, of the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. I could say the same about you, Mr. York. Yates, he corrected softly. Think we're past formalities, considering you've now saved my life along with patching me up. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of the connection forming through shared danger and mutual respect. For a moment, Zara thought he might lean closer, but instead he stood, testing his arm with a slight grimace. We should rest here for a few hours, he said. Then push on to reach the settlement by tomorrow night. They made camp in the ravine, sharing the last of Yates's trail provisions. As they talked, Zara learned more about the man who had come to her rescue. He had been born in Virginia, fought for the Union during the war, then drifted west afterward, unable to settle back into civilian life in the changed landscape of the East. What about family? She asked. Is there someone waiting for you somewhere? Yates shook his head. Lost my parents before the war, no siblings, no wife. He poked at the small fire with a stick. What about you? No family back east wondering what became of you. A sister in Boston. We write occasionally. She never understood why I followed Harold west. Zara gazed into the flames. She certainly wouldn't understand why I stayed after he died. And why did you stay? Yates asked gently. Zara considered the question. At first it was stubbornness. I wouldn't let his death mean our dream died too, but then I fell in love with this country, the openness of it, the freedom. She gestured to the vast landscape around them. Out here, I'm not just poor widow Zimmerman, I'm myself just Zara. Yates nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's why most of us come west, to find who we really are away from who everyone else thinks we should be. They resumed their journey by mid-afternoon, taking a circuitous route to avoid any potential pursuit. Yates pointed out landmarks as they rode ancient buffalo wallows, distinctive rock formations, the distant peaks of mountains with names given by the native tribes long before white settlers arrived. That night, they camped beneath a massive cottonwood tree beside a slow-moving stream. With Drummond's men no longer an immediate threat, they risked a larger fire. In its warm glow, Zara found herself studying Yates's profile as he stared thoughtfully into the flames. "What will you do?" she asked. "After we reach the settlement and I speak with the judge." He shrugged his good shoulder. "Keep moving, I suppose, always do." "Is that what you want, to always be moving?" Yates was quiet for a long moment. "Never really thought about what I want, just what needs doing next." "Perhaps it's time you did," Zara suggested softly. Their eyes met across the fire, and this time the connection between them was unmistakable. Yates stood and moved to sit beside her on the fallen log she had claimed as a seat. "What about you?" he asked. "If the judge rules in your favor, will you go back, rebuild?" The question gave her pause. Until this moment, she hadn't considered any other option. "I don't know," she admitted. "It would be starting from nothing again." "Not nothing," Yates said, his voice low. "You'd have the land, the water rights. That's something substantial. And if the judge doesn't rule in my favor." His hand found hers in the darkness. "Then you'll have choices to make, but whatever you decide, remember what I said at the river." "That I wouldn't cry alone anymore," Zara whispered. Yates nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "I meant it." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then, with gentle deliberation, Yates leaned forward and kissed her. His lips were warm against hers, the kiss both tender and questioning. Zara found herself responding, her hand rising to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they parted, Zara felt a flush spreading across her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a surprising sense of rightness. This man who had crossed a river to help her, who had protected her and respected her strength, was awakening feelings she had thought died with Harold. "I should apologize," Yates began, but Zara shook her head. "No," she said simply. "No apologies for something we both wanted." They slept that night beneath the stars, their bedrolls placed close together, hands occasionally finding each other in the darkness. For the first time since fleeing her burning homestead, Zara felt something beyond fear and loss, a cautious hope taking root in her heart. The settlement of Pine Creek came into view late the following afternoon, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a dusty main street, with scattered homesteads visible on the surrounding hillsides. It wasn't large, but it boasted a general store, a church, a saloon, and most importantly, a courthouse where the circuit judge was currently in residence. Yates guided their horse down the main street, drawing curious glances from the townsfolk. A woman riding double with a man was unusual enough to attract attention, especially given their trail-worn appearance. They took a room at the town's small hotel, the only option available requiring them to share the space, though Yates immediately offered to sleep on the floor. After days on the trail, the prospect of a real bed and hot bath was overwhelmingly appealing to Zara. "First thing tomorrow, we'll speak to Judge Caldwell," Yates said as they shared a simple meal in the hotel's dining room. He's got a reputation for fairness, even when it means standing against the territory's powerful interests. Do you think he'll help me? Zara asked, doubt creeping into her voice. If your claim is legal as you say it is, he'll uphold it. Whether that's enough to stop Drummond is another question. That night, true to his word, Yates made his bed on the floor beside the door while Zara took the narrow bed. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. The events of the past days swirled in her mind: the destruction of her home, the flight across the territory, and most distractingly, the kiss they had shared by the fireside. "Yates," she whispered into the darkness. Came his reply, indicating he was similarly awake. "Thank you." "For everything." She heard him shift on his makeshift bed. "You don't need to thank me, Zara." "I do," she insisted softly. "You could have ridden past. You could have minded your own business, as you put it." A long pause followed. "Some things a man can't ride past," he finally said. "Some people." The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning that neither was quite ready to address fully. Eventually, Zara drifted to sleep, comforted by his presence and the promise of facing tomorrow together. Judge Caldwell was a stern-faced man with sharp eyes and a reputation for seeing through deception. He listened carefully as Zara presented her case, examining her homestead papers and deed with methodical attention. "These appear to be in order, Mrs. Zimmerman," he said finally. "The water rights were indeed included in your original filing." He peered at her over his spectacles. "But you understand that Nathaniel Drummond is not a man to be trifled with. He claims those water rights based on prior usage, dating back to when the territory was first opened for settlement." "Prior usage doesn't override legal documentation," Yates interjected. "The land office confirmed her claim was valid." The judge nodded slowly. "Correct, Mr. York, which is why I will issue an injunction against any further interference with Mrs. Zimmerman's property." He began writing on an official document. "However, I cannot guarantee your safety should you return. The law's reach is limited in these parts." Zara exchanged glances with Yates. "What options do I have, Your Honor?" "You could sell the land to someone other than Drummond if you wish. You could attempt to rebuild, though I would advise hiring protection if you do. Or," the judge hesitated, "you could file a new claim elsewhere, using your status as a widow to claim additional acreage under the Homestead Act." "Start over," Zara murmured, considering the prospect. "Whatever you decide," the judge continued, "I'll have my clerk prepare the necessary documentation today. In the meantime, I suggest you both remain cautious. Word travels fast in this territory." As they left the courthouse, Yates placed a protective hand at the small of Zara's back. "What are you thinking?" he asked quietly. "I'm thinking that starting over doesn't sound as daunting as it did a week ago," she replied, meeting his gaze. "Not if I'm not facing it alone." A slow smile spread across Yates's face. "Are you asking me to help you build a new homestead, Zara Zimmerman?" "I might be." She returned his smile. "Unless you're determined to keep moving." Before he could respond, a commotion erupted at the end of the street. 3 riders had entered town, dust from the trail still clinging to their clothes. Yates recognized them immediately, pushing Zara toward the shelter of a nearby storefront. "Drummond's men," he muttered. "They must have heard we were heading this way." The men dismounted outside the saloon, scanning the street with predatory attention. The largest of the 3 spotted Yates and Zara, nudging his companions and pointing in their direction. "We need to move," Yates said urgently. "Back to the hotel, gather our things." They hurried down the boardwalk, aware of the men following at a measured pace. Inside their room, Yates quickly collected their few belongings while Zara peered nervously out the window. "They're watching the front entrance," she reported. "All 3 of them." Yates joined her at the window, assessing the situation. "There's a back staircase, leads to the alley behind the hotel." He checked his pistol. "Our horse is at the livery 2 blocks over." "We can't outrun them," Zara said. "Not all 3. "No," Yates agreed grimly. "But I can buy you time to reach the sheriff's office. With the judge's injunction, he'll have to protect you." I won't leave you to face them alone, Zara insisted, echoing her words from the lined shack. Yates turned to her, his expression intense. Zara, a knock at the door interrupted him. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Mr. York, Mrs. Zimmerman. It was the hotel manager's voice. There are men downstairs asking for you. They claim to be associates of Mr. Drummond. Yates moved to the door, opening it a crack. Tell them we've checked out, he instructed the nervous manager. Tell them we left an hour ago, headed north. The manager nodded uncertainly. They don't look like men who take kindly to being misled, sir. Neither am I, Yates replied evenly. Now go on. And if you value peace in your establishment, you'll point them in the wrong direction. After the manager departed, Yates turned back to Zara. We'll use the back stairs, move along the alley to the livery. If we can get to our horse without being seen, we might have a chance. And if we're spotted, Yates's expression hardened. Then I'll deal with them, he took her hand. Zara, I need you to know something in case things don't go well. These past days with you, they've meant more to me than any I can recall. Yates, let me finish, he insisted gently. I've been drifting for years, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots, but with you, for the first time, I can see a different path. A home. A life that means something. Zara stepped closer, placing her hand against his cheek. Then let's make sure we both walk away from this, she said with quiet determination. Because I see that same path, and I don't intend to walk it alone. They made their way cautiously down the back stairs and into the alley behind the hotel. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings as they moved stealthily toward the livery stable. They had almost reached it when a voice called from behind them. That's far enough, York. They turned to find two of Drummond's men blocking the alley, guns drawn. Yates pushed Zara slightly behind him, his own hand hovering near his holster. This doesn't need to get messy, the taller of the two men said. The boss just wants the woman and her property claim. You can ride away from this. I made a promise, Yates replied steadily. I intend to keep it. The man shook his head. Always were stubborn, weren't you, even back when you rode with the Rangers? Zara glanced at Yates in surprise. He had never mentioned being a Texas Ranger. That was a long time ago, Curtis, Yates said. Things change, people change. Not Drummond, Curtis replied with a cold smile. He still holds a grudge for how you crossed him in the Pico's dispute. Killing you will just be a bonus along with getting the woman's land. Tension crackled in the air as the four of them stood frozen in a standoff. Zara could feel Yates's body coiled like a spring beside her, ready to move at the slightest provocation. The moment was shattered by the sound of a shotgun being cocked. I'd reconsider your position, gentlemen, came a new voice from the entrance to the alley. The town sheriff stood there, shotgun raised. Beside him was Judge Caldwell, looking stern and official. This woman is under the protection of the territorial court. Any action against her will be considered a crime against the territory itself. Curtis and his companion hesitated, calculating the odds. Drummond won't be pleased, Curtis warned. Drummond isn't above the law, the judge replied firmly. Not in my jurisdiction. Now lower your weapons and clear out of my town or spend the next 6 months in my jail. With reluctance, the men holstered their guns and backed away. This isn't over, Curtis called to Yates. Not by a long shot. Only when they had disappeared did Yates relax his stance, turning to Zara with relief evident in his eyes. Thank you, Sheriff, Yates said, nodding to the lawman. Your timing is impeccable. Thank the judge, the sheriff replied. He suspected Drummond's men might try something once word of the injunction spread. Judge Caldwell approached them, official papers in hand. Mrs. Zimmerman, these are your property documents, now bearing the territorial seal and my ruling on the water rights dispute. He handed them to Zara. I've also included paperwork should you wish to file a new claim elsewhere. The choice is yours. Zara accepted the documents, her mind already made up. Thank you, Your Honor. I believe I'll be exploring new opportunities. The judge nodded, understanding in his eyes as he glanced between her and Yates. Good luck to you both then, and Mr. York, perhaps it's time you stopped drifting. The territory could use men like you putting down roots. As the judge and sheriff departed, Zara turned to Yates. "A Texas Ranger?" she asked with raised eyebrows. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Former Ranger, wasn't something I thought worth mentioning." "Any other secrets I should know about?" Yates smiled, drawing her close. "None that matter anymore. My past is just that past. What I care about now is the future." He searched her face. "Our future if you'll have me." "I believe I will," Zara replied softly. "After all, you did promise I'd never cry alone again." "And I mean to keep that promise," Yates said, his voice low with emotion, "for as long as you'll let me." Their lips met in a kiss that sealed more than words could express a commitment to face whatever came next together. 2 months later, Zara stood on the porch of a newly constructed cabin, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. The land around her was different from her previous homestead, more fertile, with a gentle stream running through a grove of pines at the property's edge. It was farther from established settlements, deeper into the territory, but that suited her fine. Behind her, she heard the sound of Yates's boots on the wooden floor as he emerged from their home, wiping his hands on a cloth after finishing the interior shelving. "It's taking shape," he observed, coming to stand beside her at the porch rail. His arm slipped naturally around her waist and she leaned into his solid presence. "It is," Zara agreed, surveying the corral he had built, the small garden she had planted, the foundation for the barn they would raise next. "Better than I imagined." In the weeks following their confrontation in Pine Creek, they had traveled north, eventually finding this unclaimed parcel near the foothills. With Zara's status as a widow and Yates's knowledge of territorial law from his ranger days, they had filed the claim together as husband and wife, married by the same judge who had granted her the injunction against Drummond. The wedding had been simple, witnessed by the sheriff and the hotel manager who had helped them evade Drummond's men. Their honeymoon had consisted of the journey to their new land and the immediate work of building their home before winter arrived. "Any regrets?" Yates asked, studying her profile in the fading light. Zara turned to face him, sliding her arms around his neck. "Not one," she assured him, "though I do wonder sometimes what would have happened if you hadn't crossed that river that day." "I couldn't have ridden past," Yates said, echoing his words from the hotel room. "Not when I saw you there." He brushed a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "Seeing you crying by that river, something told me my whole life had been leading to that moment, to you. And now?" Zara asked, smiling up at him. "Now, I finally understand what it means to be home." He kissed her softly, then more deeply, both of them silhouetted against the spectacular sunset painting the vast Montana sky. The promise made at her riverside had grown into something neither could have imagined, a love as expansive as the territory itself, and just as enduring. Where once Zara had wept alone, she now stood embraced in the arms of a man who had crossed more than just a river to reach her. Together, they had found not just shelter, but belonging. Not just companionship, but love. And in this wild country where promises were often broken as easily as they were made, theirs remained unshakable that whatever joys or sorrows lay ahead, they would face them side by side.